Hello and welcome to Nashville Savvy. This is Megan Lee Petidlik. I am your host for all things Nashville. I don't know everything about Nashville though, so don't put that on me. But today we have a full show. I hope that you enjoyed the little posters. I'm hoping it becomes like a Where's Waldo, where you're trying to find the things in the collage of what we're going to be talking about today. But we're going to start out with some new news. Obviously, everybody's talking about the special session, which we just had the actual date and time solidified and signed in a proclamation by Governor Bill Lee. This was obviously coming. Nobody is surprised by this, but in the last few weeks, we've had different people calling to not to cancel the session. We recently had the state GOP state executive committee reach out and send a letter to the governor asking him to cancel. We also have seen other special interest groups ask for him to cancel. We've seen a lot of people asking for him to cancel, and he did not. He made his proclamation, and now we're going to be going into a crazy end of August as we're also going into the runoff elections here in Nashville. So we got a lot of stuff going on. So when we looked at the actual proclamation, so a couple things happened. The proclamation was signed, it was released with a bunch of initiatives and the list of topics that can be included during the special session. So if you ever we've had a lot of special sessions over the last few years, so I'm sure you might recall a few of them. But what is good to know is that there are parameters on the special session that are outlined by this proclamation that is made by Governor Lee. So the only type of legislation that can come forward is legislation that falls within his guidelines that he set up, like language that falls within the parameters of the line items that he put in his proclamation. So we can't see we're not going to see things about, immigration or stuff about things that aren't mentioned in his proclamation. We're only going to see bills that had the language mentioned in the proclamation. That being said, there's a lot of language in this proclamation. I think there's about 14 line items, and some of them are pretty extensive. We also saw 4 bills already filed yesterday morning, so we're really off and running, and obviously legislators have been planning for this alongside the governor all summer. So we're sure to see very thought out legislation. And let's basically, first and foremost, let's go through the main focuses by Governor Lee. They were obviously school safety, mental health, an update on the TBI. The TBI did a report to look into basically the efficiency of their registering people in the system for background checks and stuff like that. They're trying to make that more efficient and find the kinks in the system and the loopholes that people are kind of slipping through the cracks. So the TBI is going to update us with the analysis of that and obviously give suggestions to the legislature of what should be done about that. Interestingly, there are a couple other things that came up that people didn't necessarily expect. Of course, this is a special session on public safety. So though we widely have associated the call for this special session due to the terrible massacre that happened at Covenant in March, it also turned into this broad sweeping public safety special session. So we're also going to see some human trafficking legislation, or at least it's going to be mentioned during this special session. I know that Aaron Goldbrinson, the head over there at Tennessee Faith and Freedom Coalition, he has met with the Lee administration, and they're the ones who really got human trafficking added to the list of legislative priorities for this special session. So the reason that we're seeing the human trafficking on there is definitely a lot to do with the Tennessee Faith and Freedom Coalition, along with a lot of support, because this has been a major issue and a hot button issue as well. Support from people like Jody Barrett. Here's a nice little tweet out here. Jody Barrett, Senator Jack Johnson. We've also seen Jason Zachary support the human trafficking initiative. So this is something that people who are going to be bringing legislation to the special session are definitely looking into. But I think that some onlookers from the outside were surprised that this made it onto the list that the governor provided. But of course, we're all very excited because this is a awful thing going on everywhere and surprisingly happening at alarming rates throughout our state. So hopefully we're going to see some updates and get some more data about what the human trafficking situation and sex slavery situation looks like in Tennessee, so that we could take some solid steps in tackling this awful thing that has been plaguing not only our country, but the world, and kind of somehow sneaks underneath the radar. So that's one interesting thing that was added to the special session. Another interesting thing that we might be looking at is, well, okay, let's pull up our Tennessean quote from the week. So obviously red flag laws and things called ERPOs, meaning these, oh gosh, I don't even know the actual technical term here, they're extreme protection order or extreme risk protection orders. Okay, now I remember ERPOs. People have been weary throughout the state. You know, this is obviously it's a Republican state, it's a conservative state, and there's a lot of support for Second Amendment rights in this state. So we've had a lot of different groups worried that there was going to be red flag laws pushed through this session. And when we look into the language, there's a couple things that I want to point out, because it perhaps might get a little bit confusing, because you're hearing legislators saying there's absolutely no way any of that stuff will get passed if it's brought forward. You have something like the Tennessean. If we look at this quote, they're saying Lee will not push for an extreme risk order in his administrative bill package, despite his insistence over the summer that he would pursue the legislation. The session's parameters would allow a lawmaker to pitch a similar proposal, though it would face an uphill battle to passage. So that is true. So let's pull up now the language that is actually part of an old bill. So here we're looking at HB 1574 and HB 1564. This is an old late filed bill from regular General Assembly. And it was obviously filed by, the regular Heidi Campbell and Bob Freeman. And so when we look at this language, it includes, it's making an adjustment for risk protection orders of protection, how these can be reported. This is something that we saw come up at the end of General Assembly that did not make it through, but we've seen the language before, and this is kind of what people were starting to get worried about as far as red flag laws. Now, this does not say anything, doesn't say extreme risk orders of protection. It's just talking about orders of protection, but it still was literally sending off the red flags in people's mind that this might be a red flag law. Now, I'll read to you a little bit of the language that is on line item 12 on the list of the proclamation provided by the governor. It includes temporary mental health orders of protection, which must be initiated by law enforcement, must require a due process hearing, must require a respondent to undergo an assessment for suicide and homicidal ideation, and must require law enforcement to prove its case by clear and convincing evidence. And it could potentially basically implement an order of protection that perhaps could lead to, somebody's firearms being taken away for 180 days. Regardless, that language is so similar to that other legislation that we've seen in the past that could have been potentially a red flag law, and it's included in the proclamation. So technically, somebody could bring forward potentially some type of red flag legislation, but we've been assured by not only multiple legislators and GOP leaders, but Jason Zachary came out adamant yesterday in a video on Twitter that he was like, there's no way, even if somebody brings something forward, there's no way that we would pass through. So I guess that we'll see what happens. Of course, we never know what happens until it happens here in Tennessee, especially up at the Hill. So we'll see what happens. The language is technically in there, but it doesn't sound like anybody is willing to throw their weight behind it in the GOP at this point, especially not even the governor. The next thing that we saw at the very end of the proclamation was language pertaining to the School Safety Act. And if you guys recall, this was funding that was set aside for grant money that would help allocate or help to provide SRO officers for every public school in Tennessee. And then the School Safety Act also included critical funding for basically reinforcing schools with certain types of glass and barriers and other infrastructure that would lead to a safer school against things like what we saw happen at Covenant. So that was passed during General Assembly, and this language is included in the bottom of the proclamation. So we're uncertain exactly why this was included, what might come up. Something could come up because it's included in the proclamation. But I want to bring you back to there's a lot of confusion in Nashville about this, because we've had this battle going on regarding putting SRO officers in elementary schools. So in MNPS, we have allowed, or the school administrators and the director, and they decided, okay, we're going to take this grant program up, and we're going to place SRO officers in middle school and high schools, but we're going to say no when it comes to placing them in elementary schools. And the chief of police, Chief Drake, he's the one who came out and publicly turned down the money for the SROs. And he cited it's because they're short-staffed, and so they can't afford to, make some of their officers turn them into SROs and put them in schools because they're already short-staffed. And this confused a lot of people. And I want to show you a video why this has confused a lot of people. Like, why would the police chief be turning down the grant money and not the schools? So let's watch originally what was said at the launch of this grant program by the governor back in June. So we're going to pull that video up right now.
Together with the General Assembly, we passed our school safety bill, created two important grant programs. The first will provide funding to place a full-time armed SRO in each public school. And the second will provide critical funding to make physical security upgrades at public and non-public Tennessee schools. We want schools across Tennessee to know that they can apply for this funding now, and that you'll encourage others in your district to do so as well. School leaders can visit tn.gov to learn more about how you can use this funding and about applications.
All right, so sorry about some of that cutting out there, but basically he was calling on the schools and the administrators to apply for this funding in that video. So people were clearly, sorry, I'm getting some issues with sound right now. Am I still echoing? Gee, sorry guys. Hopefully you guys can still hear me.
Physical security.
Ooh. Okay. So we're back. Sorry, guys. So basically, people here got a little bit confused because they didn't understand why the chief was turning down the grant money when they thought that it was schools who had to apply for the grant money. Clearly, the governor made it seem like that's how it works. Now, when you actually look into how to apply for it, sorry, am I still echoing, guys? Okay. So back on track. So basically now we have we're going to pull up a quote here from Director Battle because, okay, so the chief came out. He said that they're not going to be able to accept this grant money. Now, Director Battle, and before Director Battle, who's the director of MNPS schools, she came out and from years ago, she's said that she feels that putting SRO officers in elementary school criminalizes like childhood behavior. Okay. And I guess that we're not going to pull up the quote right now, but she's come out saying that in the past. And then it kind of looks suspicious that to avoid the backlash from people, it was the chief who came out instead and said that they didn't want the grant money. But we have yet to know whether or not that's something that's going to be brought up during special session. The language is there, so we might see a discussion about this. It's really hard to tell going forward. Going on to the next item here, we have we're going to get right into the election. So I know we just ended the last round of election day, but we are going to start seeing campaigns continuing to rile up as we head into September during the runoff elections. And we're already seeing certain narratives be planted around, like mostly on Twitter, but certainly we'll see more and more. Let's start with the fact that there's only 3 districted races that are going to be on the runoff elections. That's going to be District 4, District 11, and District 29. So if you're in one of those districts, you do have a runoff race for your district, and that's going to be, they're all really close. So your vote really counts. I mean, not that it doesn't usually count, but some of these races were within tens of votes of each other. And of course, depending on how apathetic people are, it really, in these types of races, people are only winning with a couple thousand, even a couple hundred, 900 votes here. So you're electing somebody and your vote really counts in these races because they are smaller districted areas and just the turnout is not as high. So keep that in mind if you have one of those districted races, if you're in one of those districts. Also, only one person made it past the threshold to make it onto the at-large as an at-large council member, and that was Zulfa Swara, and she goes by Z, and so hopefully I didn't butcher her first name, but her last name is Swara, Councilmember Swara, and she's been a districted council member now. She's running and won her seat. She passed the threshold of votes, and she has a seat as a at-large council member, but there are 4 seats that are still open, guys. So we're going to be voting. There's only 8 people. They've narrowed the pool to 8 people. You're going to pick 4 of those 8 people to go forward. So make sure that you look into what that list is. We'll be putting more information out and updating our voter guide on the pamphleteer.co. And then, of course, we have our mayoral race, which is Alice Rowley versus Freddie O'Connell. And it's interesting looking over the last week, a couple things that have come out. First, I want to start with an endorsement that came out today that Fran Bush endorsed Alice Rowley. And you all might remember Fran Bush. She was a MNPS school board member, and she was one of the only school board members, if not the only school board member, who really fought against the fact that they wouldn't reopen schools during COVID. She was like the only voice saying, like, you guys, we cannot keep these kids at home, away from each other, away from having that communal experience of school. Where she really fought for that. And she has been in public life. She has been known as leaning Democrat or as identifying as a Democrat, but she ran for re-election on the school board. And this time around, because of a state law, the school board races were not nonpartisan. They became partisan this round. So she ran as an independent. She did not run as a Democrat because she has slowly realized that she's having some issues with some of the Democratic Party. So that's super interesting that she ran as an independent. She, unfortunately, for people who supported Fran Bush and supported the fact that she was the only voice pushing back against some of these mandates and stuff, she did not win her re-election. Of course, now you may know her because she also ran in the mayoral race Now, she only got just over 500 votes, so she wasn't a front runner, but she has stood strong as a voice who supports the placement of SROs in schools. She's also supported pushing for these literacy issues, like pushing against these literacy issues. And she's also somebody who has supported charter schools, even though MNPS school board is not really known for being super supportive of charter schools. If you live here, you know. But this is her quote from her endorsement. "I'm proud to endorse Alice Rowley for mayor. Alice and I share a great deal in our concerns for the safety of our children and the need for SROs in every MNPS school. We believe in the power of early literacy to change educational outcomes. We want to support parents in making the best choice for their children's education. Alice's inclusive style of leadership is what we need to bring to the mayor's office to ensure our city is strong in all neighborhoods and to build an improved foundation for our families and for our future." Now, this is interesting how inclusive how Bush is saying how inclusive Alice is and how important it is for somebody to bring the neighborhoods together, because earlier this week, you've probably got caught wind, if you follow us on Twitter or read our newsletter, that the Banner published an article that seemed a little bit odd for the Banner, a little bit like low-hanging fruit. They reported on Alice showing up to a GOP state executive committee meeting. Now, the reason they covered this as if it was news is because, people have called Alice Rowley out as being this right-wing extremist, and she obviously has run a very moderate campaign and has been really reaching across the aisle during her entire campaign. And so them publishing this in the Banner was kind of pointing out that perhaps she's not the moderate candidate that everybody thinks she is, because she went to her own party's state executive committee meeting. That is a little bit, that's a little bit absurd. So we are seeing this shift, and this was happening towards the beginning of the race, and it didn't really stick. But towards the beginning of the race, during the general race, when everybody was in it, we saw people really trying to paint Alice Rowley as this right-wing extremist. And the truth of the matter is, the most extreme positions in this race were coming from progressives. And Rowley is really more of the moderate, considered a moderate in this race as far as her actual policies. So the fact that they're trying to now shift this narrative that Alice Rowley is the extremist, when somebody like Freddie O'Connell, he comes right out and says that he's the only progressive in the race. And so it's interesting that it's like this weird projection of who's the real extremist here. And then you have people like Fran Bush, who is very active and understands how things work, especially in the MNPS system here in Nashville, who is like, that's not, I support Alice Rowley because of her inclusiveness. So just watch for that narrative. We're going to see more and more of this, of these types of things where radicals are trying to pin people who are more moderate as being the actual radicals. So now we're going to get away from lately, and we're going to switch over to local corner. So I have a video that I want to show you guys that was posted by Barstool Sports. And it's, if we could pull that up, I wanted to show it really quick. So this video, it doesn't have any sound because I didn't want to get kicked off the internet, but we could just go ahead and play it whenever. But this video is of a bachelorette, like a girl who's celebrating her, it's her bachelorette party here in Nashville, wearing an air tag. And, obviously they showed up on Barstool Sports, and they're like, I hope that you find your way home, whoever this girl is wearing the air tag. And I had to think how silly it is that for one, of course we make fun of the bachelorettes. We call them woo girls. We make fun of everybody who goes and does crazy stuff and acts crazy and is having a good time downtown. Like that's part of the charm, is getting to make fun of how like just getting to make fun of everything and make light of it. So it's kind of hilarious that Freddie O'Connell has waged war against bachelorettes and billionaires, like putting them all in the same group as these like nefarious, awful things, beasts that like run our city and run it over. And to be honest with you, it just is a testament to the safety of our city, that people, women are willing to come here and celebrate. They feel safe celebrating something like a bachelorette party here. Also, I would rather large gaggles of women instead of large gaggles of men, potentially on their bachelor parties, potentially destroying more things than girls. I mean, you can make the case that women do a good job at destroying bathrooms, but at least while they're doing their makeup. But I just found this video very charming and funny, and it made me feel sad if we end up making a move that really pushes away some of our staple tourism that we've grown to like love to hate. So for our Metro Mayhem, which is, if you guys haven't watched this before, every week we're pulling out something that happens locally or has to do with like a local politician or some crazy thing that somebody said in Metro government, because it happens all the time. So, and eventually I hope that we have a cool like Metro Mayhem like song or something that introduces it. But this week I'm going to pull up Doing It for the Kids. It's an article that was written by Freddie O'Connell. I mean, this article was written a long time ago. It was published on this website called Unmarried Equality. Okay. So this is the reason I wanted to bring this up, because it was super interesting when we were reflecting on what some of the narratives that we might see coming out as we head into the campaigning that's going to happen before the runoffs. This article was published, and it was published I'm assuming in a response to some of this egregious behavior by some of the state GOP members back when this was published years and years and years ago. He mentions Senator Paul Stanley, and, kind of some of the things that had come up where he was, I'm trying to read this. Hold on. He was, I guess, like harassing some of the younger interns that were working for him. But I think that was the point of this article. But the weird thing about this article is he really goes into his relationship with his partner, which is a woman. But the opening line here, I am a committed heterosexual, unmarried in an unmarried relationship. In fact, this month I will celebrate my 10th anniversary with my partner. Okay, fine. He goes on to say how it's, uncomfortable when people keep asking, when are you going to make an honest man of her or honest woman of her? When are you going to like put a ring on it and whatnot? And of course, when are we going to reproduce? That's the terminology he used. And then he lays it on really thick with the case for morality. Okay. And this is why this is a strange article, and maybe we'll link it underneath this video once we publish it, is that it makes this case, it airs out the dirty laundry of somebody that is doing an egregious and disgusting thing, soliciting, using your power to solicit or try to solicit sex or sexual favors from people who work underneath you. That's disgusting. And we see our fair share from the GOP here in the state of Tennessee. And I personally I'm not going to stand here and defend anybody who does anything like that. Of course, we see it happen all the time, but it's not okay in my book. But he then goes on this like moral rant, and it honestly, it's almost like doth protest too much here. He makes this whole case that he Okay, so he's never kissed any woman except for the woman he's a partner with. They don't keep any alcohol in the house. She doesn't drink at all. He barely drinks. Neither uses drugs. Neither of us have ever been convicted of a crime. She volunteers regularly at the local clinic and provides free healthcare to people without health insurance. I serve at the committee and board level with a number of municipal and nonprofit agencies. We both have college degrees. I mean, like, he goes down the laundry list. Of he's like being basically the now the moral measuring stick here in this piece, where he's also making the case for his, equality as an unmarried person. Okay, I doubt anybody actually cared. We didn't care until you brought it up. So that was my Metro Mayhem, a little bit of a ridiculous article published by your very own Freddie O'Connell back about 10 years ago. And you could check it out in the comments later on this video. So basically, that's it. We're going to wrap up here for today. Thanks for joining me. Sorry about some of the technical difficulties. Hopefully we'll work out those kinks in the future, but join back, subscribe to the Pamphleteer. We always are publishing daily articles and sending them to your mailbox for free. So please feel free to subscribe over at thepamphleteer.co. And we'll keep you updated on this special session going forward. It's gonna get a little wild, I have a feeling. So thanks for tuning in, guys.